Move from this skate sound to this clear, crisp tone. Today's video is all about trying to apply all of the arm weight things we talked about in the last video to the string in order to get a crisp, clear sound. We're going to be working on getting a straight bow using very small bows and employing the Tekkas stop-stop rhythm that I just demonstrated. If you haven't watched my previous video where we talk about finding the proper bow hold and employing arm weight in order to get our sound, make sure you go back and watch that because a lot of the things that we talk about in this video will be building on the concepts introduced in that one. Pulling a straight bow on the violin is not as easy as it may at first seem, and it takes a lot of repetitions before you're going to be really comfortable doing it. The goal as you're getting these repetitions has to be to never pull a crooked bow. When practicing anything, more important than the number of correct repetitions you do is the number of correct repetitions you do compared to the number of incorrect repetitions you do. If you're only getting it correct 70% of the time, that's how often you'll get it correct when you actually perform. That's why whenever we practice, we're always aiming to get the percentage of correct repetitions as high as possible. So as you're doing these exercises, be very patient and make sure that you are being methodical about not allowing yourself to pull a crooked bow. The first exercise that will help us accomplish this goal is arm scrubs. This is what they look like. Because the arm is straight, there's no chance of you practicing in a curved arm motion. As you are doing this, it is important that you are hanging a lot of arm weight so we can continue getting in that good habit. If you're working on this with a young child, I would recommend doing my turn, your turn with them, where you do it once and they do it once, so that they can imitate the sound of the rhythm and also develop a sense of pulse. Whenever you are doing an exercise with a young child, there should almost always be an aspect of rhythm to it, which will help you to get into a flow of doing it together. This flow will also help you get a lot more repetitions in without as much of a fight. So I do something like this. Ready, go. Ready, go. You're going to want to do these many times daily until it becomes absolutely automatic. Warming up with this exercise every day before you get into the actual bow work will help to make sure that your arm is already primed to move in the right way. While I hesitate to put an exact number of repetitions on this, do at least 25 good ones before heading into the next exercise. The next exercise, we're going to put the bow on the string and start pulling a sound using the Tekkas stop-stop rhythm. As a prerequisite to this exercise, you have to have a fundamental understanding of how to support and hold the violin. I will have a video on this soon, and when it's made, I'll post a link right here. For starters, we want to put the bow on the string at the balance point. The balance point is the spot in the bow where the frog and the tip side of the bow are balanced evenly. I like to start from the balance point because it feels most effortless there, and you're also fairly close to the frog where you have greater access to arm weight. When you begin, make sure you are truly hanging arm weight in the stick and not over gripping. On these initial tekkas, I wouldn't even be too concerned about whether you get a scratch sound or not. I would just be interested in finding relaxation and making sure that you're keeping a straight bow. We want this clarity of sound, and we want to avoid any sort of skate sound. This means we're not properly engaging our arm weight. When you're doing these tekkas, make sure to use a very small amount of bow, which will make it easier for you to stay straight. I'd recommend about 2 to 3 inches. In order to keep you honest with using a small amount of bow, you can put tapes on the bow, or you can use clothespins to section off the area. Whether you're a practice partner or someone trying to learn yourself, I would recommend getting someone to help you as you try to master getting a straight bow at the beginning. One of the benefits of having a partner is that they can keep you accountable when it comes to keeping the bow straight. In the beginning, it should be the partner's job to try and teach the arm how to move in the correct motion. So for starters, you want to go to the balance point, and you want to pick a point that's about halfway in between the fingerboard and the bridge, maybe slightly favoring the bridge. And then you want to guide the arm to be perfectly straight with the bridge, perfectly parallel with it. Notice that as I'm doing this, I'm just making sure that this bow doesn't deviate along a curved line. This can be challenging, and you'll notice that I have a hand on the wrist. If the wrist stays locked, that bow is going to go in a curve. And so what I'm doing is I'm just sort of poking and prodding to make sure that looseness stays here. You may also find some tension in the fingers, but if you pull the bow straight, you actually have to sort of loosen up those fingers. There's no way for it to actually move in a straight line unless there's some flexibility there. You want to do these until the hand is moving fluidly and comfortably. I hesitate to put a number on this, but at least 25, could range up to 100 before we start moving on to the next stage. The next stage is where we take turns pulling the bow. The first one I will pull, and then I'll let her pull it. Ready, and. 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 Awesome. So you'll notice that on the first ones, I was guiding the bow myself, and then on the other one, I did use my hand to create a bridge for the bow. And so I would put the index finger and the middle finger over the top of the bow, and then the thumb I would put next to the bow as well to just keep it in a straight line. And this was to make sure that when she was doing her turn, we were keeping our goal of never pulling a crooked bow. After we get comfortable doing these tekkas where we're taking turns, then it's up to her to do every single repetition. Ready, and. Ready, and. Ready, and. Ready, and. Ready, and. Ready, and. The only thing I'm doing is I'm pausing occasionally when I'm sensing a little bit of tension come into the system. And I'm just making sure that that tension gets eliminated before I go on to the next repetition. After we become really comfortable with this, it's time to start putting in repetitions where she's doing it on her own. Ready, and. Ready, and. Ready, and. Ready, and. Ready, and. Again, the goal is to never pull a crooked bow. So if she starts pulling off center, I will immediately return my hand to it. And if we need to do more repetitions with my hand here before we return to having her take over the whole bow stroke, we should do that. At first, you should probably switch back and forth between doing one repetition where your hand is here and then another repetition where she's doing it on her own. But as she gets better at it, you can start being a little bit more fluid with the number of repetitions that she does on her own, and then only return your hand when the bow starts being crooked. Ready, and. Ready, and. Ready, and. Ready, and. Ready, and. Ready, and. You'll notice I'm also just keeping a really sharp eye on how straight it is with the bridge. If I notice that at the very beginning it's a little bit off kilter, I'll immediately swap it for her and let her continue to try and pull a straight bow. Ready, and. Ready, and. Ready, and. Ready, and. Ready, and. Ready, and. Now Kate already knows how to pull a straight bow, so this went fairly quickly, but I have to say that this is very difficult for a lot of people to do, and having a partner there who has this perspective and also the ability to tweak things can be incredibly helpful. If you don't have a practice partner, there are some tools that you can use in order to help get a straight bow. One of the simplest things you can do is get a straw and place it in each of these holes. And that will provide a little bit of a guidepost for your bow to go down, which will help you to keep the goal of never pulling a crooked bow. There's also a device that I purchased at one point, which may be lost with one of my students at the moment, which attaches to both of the ribs. It has two metal brackets that go over the string that create a lane for the bow to go down. I'll put a link to this product in the description, but do be careful. It does clamp the ribs rather tightly, so I'd recommend putting some protection on it to make sure that it doesn't hurt your violin. As you're improving with this exercise, begin to take more of the responsibility yourself in removing the training wheels. As you're doing this, make sure to look in a mirror to make sure that your bow is straight. When you're looking in the mirror, make sure to line it up so that the bridge is making this really clear line so that the bridge almost disappears. And then you can see more clearly if your bow is staying straight. In terms of repetitions for this exercise, the sky is the limit. I wouldn't expect to be proficient at pulling a straight bow with less than 10,000 tekkas. This may seem extreme, and I do think that if you are very careful at keeping our first rule of never pulling a crooked bow, you can do it faster. However, for most students in my studio, I would say this is a pretty accurate estimate. While getting 10,000 tekkas may seem crazy, if you break it down into smaller sections, it's actually more manageable. Consider if you did 500 tekkas a day. It would only take you 20 days to get to 10,000. And if you can get through about 30 tekkas in a minute, it only takes you about 15 minutes to get those 500. After you can pull a straight bow on the tekkas, it's then your job to be able to apply these to the twinkle variations in the Suzuki books. In order to play the actual piece, we need another exercise to help us with our string crossings. When we're pulling a sound on the violin, we typically want the elbow to be slightly below the hand. If the elbow gets above the hand, then it ends up getting into this sort of pressy position and it ends up getting a forced sound. This exercise will help us to avoid getting into that position when we switch over to the E string. The rule of thumb is anytime you're going towards a higher string, you want the elbow to lead the string crossing. Anytime you're going towards a lower string, you want the hand to lead the string crossing. And that way the elbow always stays below the hand. This is the way that the exercise goes in order to ingrain that into our bodies. Elbow, hand, hand, elbow, elbow, hand, hand, elbow. You'll notice that when she was doing the hand portion, I did keep my finger on the wrist just to make sure that when I lifted the hand, the whole arm didn't come up. We do want it to be just a hand motion and then for the elbow to follow. Initially, it can be challenging to have the dexterity to move these individually, so it's something that needs to be practiced in. You'll also notice that I had a rhythmic aspect to the exercise so that you're very deliberate about moving the elbow individually and then the hand separately. As Kate masters this, I turn over the responsibility to move the joints over to her. Elbow, hand, hand, elbow, elbow, hand, hand, elbow. And just like with the other exercise, when we're transitioning to being Kate's responsibility, sometimes I'll do my turn, your turn. Well, I'll help with one and then she'll do one on her own. Elbow, hand, hand, elbow, elbow, hand, hand, elbow, elbow, hand, hand, elbow. And then you can also notice that sometimes I'll just put my hand in the way when she's reaching with her hand to make sure that the elbow doesn't come along. The partner should just be doing whatever they can in order to help the player develop the correct muscle memory. Since this is a tone series, I'm only discussing how to get a good sound in the twinkle variations. There's a lot more that goes into learning how to play them well, but that's beyond the scope of this video. Today we've talked about two main exercises. The first is arm scrubs, which warms up the proper arm motion. You'll want to do this exercise at least 25 times well each day before moving on to tekkas. The next is tekkas. When you do this, we're going to be so adamant about never pulling a crooked bow. You're only going to want to use about 2 or 3 inches of bow, and you're going to do this at the balance point. And finally, we had an exercise where we worked on the basics of string crossings, making sure that when we were moving to higher strings, the elbow leads, and when we're moving to lower strings, the hand leads. Again, don't hurry with these exercises. Take your time, become an expert. There's no other instrument that demands the kind of attention to detail right at the beginning as violin does. It will pay dividends for years to come if you do these foundation stages right. Playing the violin well takes time, but without strong foundations, we'll really run into trouble when we get into more difficult repertoire. The next video is an exciting one where we start to pull out big full tone along the whole length of the bow, so be sure to check it out.